Hello, and welcome back to the Detours in Music podcast. My name is Laura Ruppel, and today's interview is with Louis Langrée, music director of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, music director of Mostly Mozart Festival in New York, and the director of Opéra Comique in Paris, France. I hope you enjoy.
Hi, Laura. I'm Louis Langrée. I'm music director of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, music director of the Mostly Mozart Festival at Lincoln Center in New York, and also directeur du Théâtre National de l'Opéra Comique in Paris.
And how long have you done each of those three things?
So let's start with the oldest, which is Lincoln Center. It's my 21st year as music director and also my final year.
Mm-hmm.
The previous years, actually for 23 years, I'm spending all my summers in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be the last one because the festival doesn't longer exist. Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, I'm music director since 2013. So more than 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And at the Opéra Comique, this is the most recent. I was named in October 2021 and started there in November 21.
Yes. How did all of your musical passions start as a child? How was that?
Well, my father was a musician, an organist, and a teacher of music, also of theory, of counterpoint, harmony.
Mm.
So there was no other option than studying music.
Mm-hmm.
This was something I would say there was no choice from me.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, I didn't hate it enough in my childhood to give up, and now I'm very happy, deeply happy to be a musician.
Did you start as a pianist?
I start studying the piano, yes, and then flute also. I worked in several houses as a vocal coach and pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And then little by little, I started conducting. And now I can't imagine my life without music and without conducting.
Mm-hmm. When you decided you would pursue it as a profession, how was your choice of schooling or choice of jobs influenced?
Well, I never formally studied conducting.
Mm-hmm.
Was assistant, I watched, I did how I could,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have somebody who told me, you should do this gesture and this, which probably took me more time than to be able to conduct, but also it was not by imitation. It was everything I know now is by having experimented.
Mm-hmm.
And like many other things, I mean, there is two sides. There is a weakness, but there is a strength also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just wonderful.
Yeah, you're conducting, and maybe even your positions now in leadership have all been very kind of organic and natural and not so strategic as, planning for something specific to happen.
I never had a strategy of a career in my life at all. Actually, the only time I applied in my life was at the Opéra Comique.
Mm-hmm.
But even if on some other places I was dreaming that I would been asked, but
Mm-hmm.
I was not the one who said, I really would like to come here, please
Mm-hmm.
consider me. Of course, in Cincinnati and at Lincoln Center, I was dreaming that they would ask me, but yeah, it's not a strategy. Actually, why did I come to Cincinnati? I was first invited as a guest conductor, and then I thought, wow, I love this orchestra, I love this music making, I love this city, I love this community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very natural way to come, and not having a strategy. And it's the same with Lincoln Center. I
Mm-hmm.
have been coming for 3 seasons as a guest, and then when they needed a new music director, I
Yeah.
was there. They asked me, and I was thrilled, and I'm still thrilled 21 years after.
How have you been able to maintain all these different locations, all the repertoire, all the different people you have to remember? And I'm just, yeah, it's
Well,
very impressive.
between Lincoln Center and the CSO, or before, when I was at the Orchestre Philharmonique Royale de Liège in Belgium,
Mm.
or I was also chef dirigent with the Camerata Salzburg. But this was during the year. Mostly Mozart festival is only during the summer, so there was no conflict
Yeah.
of schedules. Now with the Opéra Comique, it's much harder
Mm-hmm.
for the organizing schedules, because we are not in the same time zone, and because being director of the Opéra Comique is a full-time job, so it requires every day
Mm-hmm.
attention and decisions to take, even if Mr. Macron, the president of France, told me that if I would be the candidate that he would choose, he encouraged me to continue conducting,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because um, because I am a musician that
Right.
I'm here, I'm there. But certainly it's much more heavy to have the two together. But I still have 1 season in Cincinnati,
Yes.
and I hope that even after that season, I will come back on a regular basis, because it has been a wonderful chapter of my life.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that moving your family to the States was a bigger transition, or would you say going in back to Paris and having this job kind of as an administrator, which transition do you feel like was harder?
Well, it's very different. As you
Mm-hmm.
said, I came to Cincinnati with my family, which means that my kids have 2 children, and they were teenagers on the time. So they went to a wonderful high school, the Walnut Hills High School in Cincinnati, which is a public school, but a magnet school, and just fantastic. But it was hard for them to leave Paris, to leave their friends,
Mm-hmm.
of course. Uh, and it was inventing a new life. But it also gave me the opportunity to see my children much more,
Mm-hmm.
because as I was most of the time in Cincinnati with them,
Mm-hmm.
and then they went to college, university. So then in Paris, it's much different, because it's it's a different kind of job. I mean, the primer or the, how can I say, the number of hours you dedicate every day is much more on administrative decision and to be able, administrative decision, so the house could run. I mean, every team in the technical crew, in all the stagehands, the, I don't know, costume makers, etc., could work, and then also for the administration. I'm conducting one production a year, so 6 performances, which is not a lot, but I didn't go there to conduct. I went there to have a larger view, larger input than just an artistic one.
Right. Do you think you've always been someone who's interested in kind of the bigger picture? I know in Cincinnati, you always have things to say about, our presence on social media or our ticket sales, or how the building is. And have you always been someone who thinks about things other than just what's on the score for that week?
Yes, because I mean, be a musician is not living on an ivory tower and just dreaming. It's there is a very pragmatic side of it, and having been music director for decades now with various orchestras, you know that you have to create the conditions for the musicians to feel well. But you have to challenge them also in the same time. So then, having worked for almost 40 years in opera houses, I wanted to have, yes, a larger responsibility and view. Sometimes as music director, you question, why did the general manager take this decision? This is so wrong. And actually you realize, now I realize it was not wrong at all. But of course, from the angle you see it, it feels wrong. But when you're in the center of it, then it's totally different. And sometimes I feel, well, actually, yes, the way I think, the way I view the things are valid, so let's do it.
What are some of the things you think have evolved in a positive way during your time in Cincinnati?
Well, certainly, I mean, there are various things. The relationship with the patrons, the donors, the music community is something very important here. And I'm deeply thankful that I have been allowed to cultivate this relationship. Then another part is when I arrived in Cincinnati, I remember one thing which actually many conductors noticed as well, was the overall age of the musicians. And then it means that they had to be a natural renewal of the personnel. And we had numerous auditions for strategic positions, of course, most important being the concertmaster.
Right.
But also, I mean, half of the woodwind principals, important brass player, principal trumpet now, which is going to come, and bass trombone. I hired a tuba also, and these are really strategic positions. and also a lot in the strings, from the bass section, double bass, to the first violins, also in the percussion. And of course, you can then influence maybe more the music making.
Right.
And I'm glad that actually these new musicians in the same time bring fresh blood, new energy to the orchestra, but also inspired to blend into the orchestral sound. So the tradition of this orchestra is very important. To speak in the mother language, the musical mother language of the orchestra, is crucial. And certainly the DNA of this orchestra is very, very important. So the balance, I think, is just wonderful between what you have to bring to the group, and also how to have to immerse yourself and be a part of it.
Right. You've hired over a third of the musicians in the orchestra now.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a lot.
that is a lot. You're also someone who is very interested in the history of the Cincinnati Symphony and pieces, and just knowing the context. Why do you think information like that is important to look into?
Oh, it's not important, it's essential.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I love history, it's not on that, it's to first to continue the history. I hate when some leaders, not only in music, feels that the history of the country or company will start with them. How pretentious. But if you go on the shoulders of your predecessors, then you see further, you're
Right.
higher.
You're higher up.
Exactly. And so it's not because I love history. It's because the history influences and inspires us, to well, just yesterday we performed Saint-Saëns Symphony number 3. Now it's part of the big repertoire. But when it was first performed in Cincinnati, was just 2 years after it had been premiered.
Right.
The history of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra is full of these US premieres, pieces by Richard Strauss, by Gustav Mahler, by Bartók, by etc., Scriabin. So I think it's important to still continue to keep the flame alive and vibrant. I'm speaking about US premieres, but also world premieres, pieces by Aaron Copland, and more recently Christopher Rouse, Matthias Pincher, etc., etc. There are many premieres, world premieres, US premieres, and Cincinnati premieres. And it's not only premieres, actually. I was glad that with some pieces that we premiered, we then played them back, or some pieces which had premieres decades ago. I'm thinking about, for instance, You Have the Right to Remain Silent by Anthony Davis, or Homunculus by Julia Perry. Thanks to the COVID, these pieces were not premieres, but we brought them back. And for instance, You Have the Right to Remain Silent. Now, the New York Philharmonic programmed it. The Boston Symphony programs it. So the piece exist again
Mm-hmm.
after, like the Sleeping Beauty.
Right. Right.
There are so many pieces which have a world premiere, and
Mm-hmm.
then that's it. And to have a real life, it needs to be performed by various orchestras, various conductors, or instrumental pieces, any performers, and in front of various audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And that piece really exists. And that's very important.
Right. I always appreciate hearing you talk about the reasons why the past is important and informs the present. Because I think with music history, like you mentioned the other day, the Symphony, we played it in 1888 and it was a new piece. We're still continuing. We're living in the
Absolutely.
history. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is very important,
Mhm.
certainly.
Have you had a piece that you've played or worked on that you think was really outside of your comfort zone?
Oh, yes. Any piece is out of your comfort zone.
Hmm.
There is no easy piece, even easy music to listen. I mean, to conduct it, to perform it. Yeah, of course. Now, a symphony that I would conduct for the 20th or 30th time
Hmm.
feel less dangerous than the piece I'm doing for the first time. But
Right.
still, you um, probably this feeling of being challenged is very fruitful, very fertile,
Hmm.
and is part of the life of a performer.
Hmm.
But there are famous, difficult pieces to conduct. Uh, I don't know, The Rite of Spring, even now,
Yeah.
especially in this country. I mean, any conductor student would do that without effort.
Hmm.
Not any, but yeah, there is never a comfort zone, and thank God.
Hmm.
Otherwise there wouldn't be any pressure.
Right. Right.
But just this week's program
Hmm.
with American music. I mean, I'm a French conductor.
Hmm.
I love American music, um, but it will be performed by an American orchestra.
Hmm.
So what will I give to them? Probably I will, because it's probably because I'm not American that I can feel what's deeply American in it.
Right.
Like, I'm now that I'm head of the Opéra Comique, looking back to the history of music. I mean, who created and made the French opera,
Hmm.
especially the tragédie lyrique, so identifiable? It's
Hmm.
Lully. And Lully was not French, he was Italian, of course. And he was fascinated by the French declamation,
Hmm.
maybe because it was new to him. And
Right.
then who make this big reform
Hmm.
of French opera in the 18th century? It's Gluck,
Hmm.
and Gluck was not French.
Right.
Because he was not French, probably he understood more.
Right.
The,
Right.
and
Like the
then
New World Symphony is Dvorak.
exactly. And then Meyerbeer, and then for opera, French operetta, it's Offenbach.
Hmm.
There are all the important people in the transformation of the French music are non-French.
Hmm.
So maybe I will add something that they uh, they didn't see or expect, or it's so natural that you don't pay attention anymore.
Hmm.
Um, but certainly it's challenging for me. And it's, I mean, when I say challenging, it's
Hmm.
exciting also.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm eager to start the rehearsals and then to conduct the last performances of our CSO season.
Yes, yes. Kind of an unrelated question. You are very known for your kind demeanor and your ease with talking to people. And I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that.
You know, conductors are real persons also. So I know there are several fantasies about our lives, or I mean, it's a very monastery life.
Mm-hmm.
You and very busy life. You have to program, learn score, prepare rehearsals, rehearse, travel. Uh, be sure that your laundry will be ready for the concert.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very non-important things and very important things. Most of the time, urgent things.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no time for imagine that conductors are drinking champagne and spending their time in limos and in super luxury hotels.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember after a Met performance, it was my debut with the Iphigenie en Tauride. I lived downtown Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
For the easiest and the quickest way to go from 66th Street until to the 20th Street was to take the subway.
Mm-hmm.
And after a performance, there was somebody in front of me, facing me, suddenly realizing that I was the conductor. And he told me, but I'm sorry, you're not supposed to be here. Like you're not supposed to be with us because you break our dreams or whatever. Well, I'm
This
sorry,
is
but
real life.
yeah, conductors also have a real life and they need to fill the fridge and they need to, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So am I especially accessible? I don't know. If there is an anomaly somewhere, it's not
Mm-hmm.
me.
As a kid growing up, and maybe still now, what was something you were really interested in that was outside of music?
It's hard to say because music is not a job. Music is the way of expression. So I don't feel that I'm a professional musician.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a professional conductor, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
I breathe through music. Music is part of my life. Music is part of me.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you experience you learn a wonderful news. I mean, you're in C major or in D major.
Mm-hmm.
If you suddenly have a terrible news, then you live in a seventh diminished chord with the tritones and
Mm-hmm.
this. So it's not music and then something else next to it.
Right.
Everything is music. Everything is vibration. So music is that, or music is also the emotion created by this vibration. Well,
Mm-hmm.
not only emotion, it's this balance between sensitivity and sensibility, so, which is very important. Too often we just want to be moved. I mean, of course, we need to be moved, but it also gives a elevation, a structure, a density, uh, which are super important.
Right. So you just live within this world
Yes,
all the time.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful world.
musicians who are taking auditions for orchestras now, what is some advice you have maybe for them in that process?
Be yourself, show your artistry. The general level of musicians have increased. Now, I think there are not great musicians hired by the big five orchestras or whatever. I think there is this general level which is so high now. Mm-hmm. So how to take rather the candidate number 24 versus the candidate number 89? It's just by showing your personality. Mm-hmm. And during our auditions with the CSO, I almost always ask the candidates, to change of shape, of phrasing, a color, a vibrato, mm-hmm. A tempo, a style, etc., etc., just to see not only their imagination, but their ability to immediately change something. Imagine, mm-hmm. So you are an oboe player. Imagine you play a phrase which is a lost aria from the Saint Matthew Passion, mm-hmm. With my heart is bleeding, of etc. And mm-hmm. then you will play the same phrase, exactly the same, like it would be an introduction to Don Giovanni, opera, seducing, etc. And then you play exactly the same phrase, the same notes, mm-hmm. but imagine that it is a desperation theme from a Tchaikovsky piece. Mm-hmm. And then that it could be Ravel, or so. I think this reveals the palette of colors, the courage of the candidates, mm-hmm. and their imagination. Right. And we want that. I think too often in this country, people are so afraid to do wrong that they forget that to do something, to do right, I don't dare to do that. I don't want to be judged if they don't like it. Well, if they don't like it, it's better at least that you have showed who you are, mm-hmm. rather than being somebody who just wants to fit. Yes, every winner of an audition has to fit in the orchestra, but mm-hmm. they also have to bring something new. Otherwise, what mm-hmm. would be the point to have hired them? Right. Music making is much more than just playing right the notes, or the notes right. Mm-hmm. Of course, it starts with that. But mm-hmm. then what should we do with these notes? Mm-hmm. Well, we should do music.
Yeah. Being an active participant in what you're playing and bringing life into it versus, like you said, just playing the right notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your ambitions kind of moving forward right now?
Well, my ambition now that I'm a director of the Opéra Comique in Paris, mm-hmm. is to have a successful tenure. There are not many conductors who are general managers. It's very challenging. It's very demanding, especially now, I would say, in this post-COVID mm-hmm. Period where the inflation, therefore the rise of the salaries, and in France at least, or in Europe, the consequences of the war in Ukraine.
Right.
I need to prove that it's okay to be a conductor and a general manager or a director. I will conduct much less. I won't conduct any more opera elsewhere than Opéra Comique, unless there is a connection with the Opéra Comique. I was so fortunate in my life, having been music director of chamber orchestras, symphony orchestras, festivals, opera houses, and now not anymore music director, but general director. I want to give every chance that it will be a very successful and happy voyage, that the ship will arrive safely.
Yes.
And it's exciting, but what a privilege.
How do you balance life across continents?
Well, you need to have a resistance to the stress and being able to rehearse and perform with the jet lag and actually few hours of sleeping. Because when I'm in Cincinnati, sometimes my days start very, very early because I'm in Zoom meetings with the Opéra Comique. I'm not in holidays from them. I'm not away from them.
Right.
There are many questions which only the general director can give. You can't say, well, wait, in 10 days I come back. No, you have to give an answer today. And then it depends which jet lag, I had
Which way is worse?
Well, my worst was going to Australia from Europe. And after a few days, I was still completely upside down.
Yeah.
And that was quite hard. Between the US and Europe now, it's quite.
It's okay.
I'm used to it. Only 6 hours, and a short flight. Feels long when you look at it. Well, when you look, oh my God, 8 hours, but actually, when you study scores, suddenly you
arrive.
You fasten your seatbelts because you're arriving, and you wish you would have 4 more hours to prepare the next days with rehearsals.
What do you feel like is relieving your stress right now?
Well, spending time with friends, the dinner we had together yesterday with friends from different ages, different positions, different background, different cultures, different interests, but together with having a very important role with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra is a wonderful and friendly and happy and joyous way to release stress. Otherwise, I don't know, walking in the nature.
Every time you return, people are so happy to see you and so thrilled that they still can continue a relationship with you and move into the future as your role changes. So
me too. It's I think the success of our relationship is that everybody brought what they had to bring, and shared and grew with thanks to the others.
Right.
It's not the music director who is this deus ex machina and and who would be the providential person. Not at all. This is ridiculous fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I have added some colors or flexibility, and I don't know, it's probably not to me to say, it's not my role to say what I have brought, but the orchestra has evolved, has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And but they also have made me a better conductor, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the relationship with the patrons, I mean, just when you look how wonderful and they were, so dedicated, so caring for the orchestra during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That's something beautiful. I will never
Right.
forget that.
Right. We were the first orchestra that year in the US to continue performing, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, within impossible conditions, with so much distance and masks and plexiglass between wind instruments, because of course they couldn't play with masks.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of mission impossible,
Mm-hmm.
and we made it possible. So that's just wonderful. That's a
Right.
great subject of pride, of shared pride.
Mm-hmm. And it's a good thing to remember moving into the future, because we never know what obstacle could come up. And then, we've made it through a lot of obstacles. So,
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Laura.
I hope you all enjoyed listening to that interview with Louis. I, in my work at the Cincinnati Symphony, work under Louis as his assistant, and I can't imagine a better person or mentor to learn from, to observe, and to know. He is such a kind and wonderful person. As he mentioned, encapsulated by music. Music is his life, it's how he thinks, and I've just had such a pleasure to work for him and work with him on his remaining seasons at the Cincinnati Symphony. As always, thank you for listening, and be sure to listen to our next episode.